So active transport, which is what this video is, requires ATP energy. So if you're an active person, it's going to require you to have energy. And so active transport requires ATP energy of the cell. And the reason it requires you to go against the concentration. And so rather than going from high concentration to low concentration, you're actually going opposite. You're going from a low concentration into a high, so it has to be actively moved. And so you're seeing some ATP energy being, notice that there's two particles, and maybe we need these two particles to come into the cell where a lot of particles already are. So active transport requires ATP. And so is it require energy? Yes. Is it active or passive? Well, it's called active transport, so we would hope it would be active. We're going to see that with the sodium and the potassium pump. That is a form of active transport. And so the part of the cell is the protein again, but it's going to be a protein pump. And what's going to happen is the cell is going to use the ATP energy, and it's actually going to pump the particles against the concentrating gradient. So I want you to know active is actually low to high concentration, so not going with the flow. It's basically, if you're again at that airport, you would be trying to swim upstream and try to go against all the traffic there, and that would take some energy. So pause it and write that down if you need to. So you can see this, there's only one particle, two particles here, and they're being pumped out with all this. The difference is we've got that ATP cycle going on, ATP losing a phosphate, dephosphorylation, and becoming ADP and P. So when this happens, we are getting that energy needed for that pump to happen. So there we're seeing that ATP cycle take place. And so another form of just active transport without the protein is something called endocytosis. So endocytosis is a form of active transport, but it involves the entire cell membrane. And there's going to be two types of endo. If you can remember, endo means into. Can you see all these particles are on the outside? And what's happening is the cell membrane, the whole thing is starting to engulf it, and it will make it an indentation, and then basically it surrounds it, and then it's going to close off and pinch off and become a vacuole. So this is a form of endocytosis. There are two types of endocytosis. One is called pinocytosis, and that is really fluids, and phagocytosis, and that is larger molecules. So they say pino is like cells drinking, that's more of a fluid, and phago is larger molecules that need to go into the cell. So basically the cell kind of eats it, is what it looks like. So this is just showing what's happening. The plasma membrane surrounds the material, edges of the membrane meet, and then they fuse to form a vesicle. Vesicle is just a bubble that's containing it that will move. And so larger things like organelles, organisms will get engulfed here, phagocytosis, and this would be more of a fluid. So this one is specifically pinocytosis. And so does it require energy? The answer is yes. Active or passive? It's active. Examples, we're going to get it's fluid, which is going to be like your hormones and some enzymes for your body. So you're going to hear when you do hormones, you'll talk about pinocytosis and how the cell will absorb that. And so the whole membrane, so it's not just the lipid bilayer that is involved, and the plasma membrane is going to enclose off and basically surround it, make that vesicle, and then it'll pinch off and bring it in too. So pause that if you need to write that down. Then phago, very similar. Yes, it does require energy. Yes, it is active transport. An example would be your white blood cells engulfing a bacteria or a virus, just basically kind of gobbling it up. So that's just an example. Whole membrane still involved, and the plasma membrane or cell membrane is going to surround it. It's gonna just eat it, basically. And so that's why we call phagocytosis cell eating. So both pinocytosis and phagocytosis are examples of endocytosis. Bring it into the cell, and those are both active transport. The last active transport is called exocytosis, and if you think about exiting, when you exit you leave, so this is actually the reverse of endocytosis, and basically what's happening is the cell is throwing up. Okay, and so you can see the vesicle moves, it gets closer to the surface, and then it basically spits up. In lab, when you're looking at your tissue, you might find some goblet cells that are doing this. They just spew stuff out. That's exocytosis. And so, does it require energy? Yes, it is active. Large molecule waste products that need to go out. The whole membrane is involved, and basically the vesicle is going to move itself to the outer portion, and then it's going to spew, basically like regurgitate, throw up would be how I would say exocytosis. On your test, I've given you some kind of pictures, and you kind of have to tell me if it's an endocytosis or an exocytosis. Is it bringing it in, or is it releasing it? It shouldn't be that difficult. All right, that's all of cellular transport. See you soon.